What's going on, everybody, and welcome back once again. My name is Jordan, also known as JMonster, and I'm one of the lead developers for Silmarillion Total War. Today we're going to be looking at the faction of Angband. This is a video I meant to have out quite some time ago, as Angband has been on our alpha build for a while. In fact, they were one of the first factions to go on there. But got a little bit busy, so we're a bit late getting to it, but nonetheless, here we are. And Angband is probably one of our most powerful factions. I would say that they are a powerhouse evil faction, even more so than Toldin Gaurath. So what I'm going to do is go over their strengths and their weaknesses. We'll take a look at their roster, and I will discuss things in depth there. And then I'm going to move on to a 2v2 replay between one of our newer factions, the Elves of Nargothrond, or the House of Finarfin, and a Doriath army as well, and I'll be fighting alongside Toldin Gaurath. So it's going to be a really nice 2v2 battle on a new map that you guys haven't seen before, so stick around until the end if you want to see Angband in action. But yes, so let's move on now. Angband is one of our powerhouse evil factions, and as you can see here in the strengths, they field very large numbers of heavily armored infantry and terrifying monsters, that being Balrogs and Urloki. Those are their powerhouse units that really do equalize things in terms of a line battle against the Elves. The Elves are very, very strong. They have far better fatigue than the Orcs do, so when it comes to a long fight of attrition, the Orcs are certainly at more risk of routing than the Elves would be. Their weaknesses: their elite units are expensive. They're about 5% or so more than what they otherwise would be. They're quite vulnerable to morale shocks. They do have some really good morale buffing units, Balrogs, for example, or Valaraukar, as they're called in the mod, and the Bulldogs as well, which are a terrifying elite unit. Both of those have really strong morale buffing capabilities in quite a significant radius, so that will help them stay in the fight for longer. I find Bulldogs are essential in that regard. And they don't really have any effective cavalry. The cavalry that they do have is mid-tier, and it is a little bit smaller than most mid-tier warg units. Most of them weigh in at about 60. These guys are only about 50. So their cavalry isn't amazing. It can be okay if supported, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But the faction of Angband is the northernmost realm of evil, commanded by Morgoth himself. And you can actually see Morgoth reflected in their faction icon here. This faction icon is only temporary. We may replace it with something a little bit later down the line. But that is the Iron Crown there of Morgoth, in which he set the Silmarils that he stole from Feanor's horde in Valinor after murdering his father on the doorstep to boot. Not only did he steal Feanor's prized treasure, which kicked off a war, he also killed the man's father, the only thing he loved more than the Silmaril. So the ram had truly touched the wall at that point, and that kicks off the First Age, and Morgoth would consistently be a threat to the free peoples of Beleriand, and eventually would be defeated in the War of Wrath by the Valar, who sailed out of the west to the succor of the peoples of Middle-earth. Let's move on now. Let's take a look at their roster here. So let's start with their detachments. When it comes to detachments, I try to pick units that can be useful in support, or that can complement other detachments in some way, but overall it's not just randomly chosen. So we have some Guardians of the Iron Crown attachments here, and of course many of the Angband units can actually upgrade their armor. So you can boost these guys from 10 armor to 12 armor, which in tandem with their really strong shield value makes them extremely resilient to missiles. Even armor-piercing ones will take their time in cutting these guys down from a distance. As well, Ironshot Halberds here is their second detachment, and then Ironshot Arbalists are the third and final detachment. Ironshot Arbalists, unlike most of the mid-tier roster, can't upgrade their armor. Can't do it at all. You can give them an extra attack upgrade, which is nice. And one thing to note about upgrades is that Angband pays full price for armor upgrades, but they have a reduced price for the attack upgrades. So attack upgrades usually run you about 30, and armor upgrades 60. The Angband orcs will only pay about 25. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does actually help you save a little bit and potentially bring units that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. So it does make a difference. Let's move on now to their elite corps. This is their pride and joy. We will start with the Bulldogs of Angband, who, as I mentioned, have a very substantial morale buffing effect, which keeps the otherwise very fragile mid-tier roster at least in terms of their morale. Obviously, their armor is quite good, but it helps keep them in the fight and from fleeing at the first sign of trouble. So a very important unit. They can upgrade their armor and their attack as well, and that makes them very, very fearsome with their 12 armor. And it says 15, but honestly, it brings it up to 16. So this is a very strong unit. It has seen me through many, many tough spots. If you guys watched our recent, I believe I called it the subjugation of Austin-Gelion, and you were definitely then very aware of how powerful the Angbands unit, not the Angband unit, the Bulldog unit can be in the Angband roster for keeping their armies together and for even going toe-to-toe with Elven elite units. So, very important unit. I usually tend to bring one of them. Next we have the Valaraukar, and they have a plus 10 morale and a much smaller radius bonus, but it is still very significant. They have 14 armor, 16 skill, a ton of mass, and they're also fear-causing units, one of the few that are actually in the game. I believe Angband has 2. No, actually they just have the ones. This is the only fear-causing unit that they have. Yeah, really strong unit. They're like super-powered trolls, essentially, and they will be getting at some points a javelin projectile, which I have to add the animations for, but soon enough you will have that, probably not in the open alpha, though. Next up, we have the Trollgarn of Gothmog. They are quite numerous. They have very, very heavy armor, although they can't upgrade. They can upgrade their attack at the very least. They do a good amount of damage there with 20 attack. That's more than enough to get through the melee defense and armor and shield of most units in the game. Only really high-tier units like Elven Elite Bodyguards will be able to stand up to these guys and take them down in the long term. Really good charge bonus as well. They've got shields, so they're not easy to take down with arrows. Their skill is a little bit low, but then they are trolls, so that's just kind of how it's going to be. And you can actually take 2 of them. So you can bring these guys in great numbers. Usually I don't bring 2 of them, I'll bring just 1. But in the replay I'm going to show you, actually, I do bring 2 units of Trollgarn of Gothmog, and you can see just how destructive they can be. Next we have the Ururoki, which is more of a supporting unit. They breathe fire, which is not armor piercing, but the 12 missile damage does make them effective against most non-heavy units in the game. Units with high shield and high armor values are going to shrug off the fire, so obviously it's not worth your time to use your limited ammunition on that. But they also are quite formidable in melee as well. They have an area of effect attack, so very, very scary. Their charge bonus is okay. We actually reduced it quite recently. And they have a small bonus against all mount types, including other elephant units. So they can use to fight with other elephant class units, which will eventually be in the game. Tolin Gauderhoth will be getting one for sure. And potentially, if we can figure out how to make it work properly, we might have some single entity heroes in the game as well, which I may classify as elephants, so that they get their AoE attack, which would mean that the Ururoki can be quite effective against them as well. Now we move on to the mid-tier roster. We have Halberdiers, Ironshod Legionaries, Ironshod Reavers, and Ironshod Ravagers. We've already spoken a little bit about the Ironshod Arbalists. They are a crossbow unit. They've got 8 missile damage. It is, of course, armor piercing. They can use stakes. And all Orcish units are good at combat in the snow or in deserts. And that's to represent the mountain homes that they live in Angband, as well as the desolation outside of it, such as the Anfauglith, the burned plain that was once Ardgalen before the Battle of Sudden Flame. But a few important things to note about these units. They have quite high armor, their skill isn't amazing, and their morale is only about 12. And they don't have an amazing response to morale shocks, so it is possible, if you hit them at the right time, and let's say a general's bodyguard goes down and then you have a sudden resurgence on your side of the field, you can scatter an army quite quickly. They have regular fatigue traits, so they just have hardy instead of very hardy, which all the elves have. So in long engagements, especially moving into the late game, you will want to give them a little bit of time to rest if you are able. Otherwise, even with morale buffing effects, these guys may begin to flee, as is fitting of orcs, I feel. As I've mentioned a couple times now, their entire mid-tier roster can upgrade their armor and their attack. And each of these units does something a little bit different. So the Ironshod Ravagers are devastating shock troops. Their armor is decent, and that's really their main means of defense. They've got terrible skill, so even against other orcs, these guys will fall away quite quickly, but as you can see, they have a very high charge bonus, which coupled with their base attack can make them very deadly off the charge, and that's where you're going to get a lot of value out of them. Next up, we have the Iron Shod Reavers. Important to note that one-handed axes are a little bit more like almost like a hybrid shock unit. Their charge isn't as high as a shock unit is. They don't get the same percentage bonuses, but it is still nonetheless about 25% higher. So if you look at the difference here between the charge bonuses, the Halberdiers are a little bit different because they have a two-handed weapon. But the Iron Shod Legionaries have very low charge compared to the 5 charge of the Iron Shods. They call these guys Reavers? These are the Legionnaires. They have the low charge, and the Reavers have 5 charge. So off the charge, you can get a decent amount of value out of them. Their skill is far lower, however, so armor piercing will be particularly effective against them, and just anything that has high damage. Most things can be 2 skill. But they do kind of compensate for that somewhat with their armor value when you upgrade them, and they have the 8 attack as well, so that's pretty nice. Next we have the Legionnaires. A little bit better for protecting your halberd line, for example. I like to use them in tandem with the halberds. They've got better skill. They've got double the skill of the Reavers, and yeah, they don't have as high attack. They don't have as high of charge. So they kind of trade off a little bit there, but it does help supplement your numbers as well. But they make a little bit more of a proper line infantry unit, whereas I tend to use the Reavers for flanking. Getting around behind enemy lines and being much more defensive. I don't mind being more passive when it comes to using my Legionnaire battalions. Next up, we have the Halberdiers, and this is really how Angband does well against Elven infantry, because the Halberdiers have greater range than a lot of elves. So it's not easy to get in there and to push them. At least if their flanks are protected, you can start to crush them over time if you can envelop them on the wings. But otherwise, in the center, they're a very solid unit. I like to pair them if I'm playing against the Sons of Feanor with the Guardians of the Iron Crown, which are a mace unit, but we'll get into them right now, in fact. So we have the Guardians of the Iron Crown and the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown. Both of these units will give +2 morale to nearby soldiers, and that's to help compensate a little bit for the low morale and the low fatigue, relatively low fatigue of the Orc units relative to the Elves. So the Mace unit, as I mentioned, you can upgrade their armor, give them a little bit of extra damage there, and you can bump them up to 10 damage, because attack upgrades effectively give 2 damage, and armor upgrades, of course, give 2 as well. So they go up to 12 armor and 10 attack when you upgrade them, and that's armor piercing as well. So a very good answer to Elven heavy infantry. A little bit more wasted on things that have very high melee defense, so I probably wouldn't use them against spears, as spears, most Elven spears are going to match them with 10 or higher melee skill, and you're not really going to get as much out of the armor piercing as melee defense is a stat that is essentially immune to the effects of armor piercing. So you're not going to get that halving bonus that you would if it was just a pure armor value. Next we have the Spear Guard of the Iron Crown. I find these guys are fantastic for holding a line. If you need something to hold, or you need to hold a choke point, or you just want to be a little bit more defensive on your front line, and then be aggressive on your wings and try and crush your enemy that way, then the Spear Guard are the way to go. With the morale bonus, the high skill, the high armor, especially when upgraded, they're just a fantastic holding unit that you can rely on to hold a line for a very long time, which is something you can't necessarily say with a lot of the other units on the Angband roster, especially when unsupported. Next, we have the low-tier units, and there's just really 2 of them. So we have the Wretches of Angband. They're fodder spearmen, but do not be deceived. If you run high-tier cavalry into these guys, that high-tier cavalry is going to take losses disproportionate to the cost of the Wretches that they manage to cut down. They are an effective screen, and that is why they are useful to bring in your army compositions. You're not going to get killing power from a 1-damage spear unit, but you are going to have a cost-effective, numerous screen that you can bring to be a pain in the ass for enemy cavalry. Now, it's worth noting that with their 10 morale and their very low, kind of untrained response to morale shocks, it is very easy to rout the Wretches of Angband if they get themselves into a tough position. So I personally like to give them 1 chevron, and it doesn't make them all that more expensive if you look here. So it's going to bump from 350 to 434. That's still very cheap and a lot of these units here are cheaper as well. So you can afford to bring chevrons as the Orcish factions more often than not, and this is going to really increase their staying power. Next up we have the Thralls. The Thralls are able to use stakes, which is atypical of low-tier archers of this kind. And they mostly make up for what they lack in accuracy and missile damage, and range, of course, with their high numbers. That being said, these guys will scatter like nobody's business if cavalry manages to get into them, or if infantry manages to get into them. They don't have any fatigue traits at all, but that's a trait shared by both of the lower tier units. So once their fatigue is gone, it is gone, unless you're willing to wait about 30 minutes in battle for them to regain just a little bit of their fatigue longevity. So ultimately these are fodder units, but they make excellent supporting troops. So they still do have a place on the roster alongside the likes of the Valaraukar and the Bulldogs as well. Finally, a little note here on the artillery, as Orcish artillery does operate a little bit differently. The ballista is pretty well the same as it's always been. It's got 8 ammunition. It operates as you would expect, as advertised on the tin. It's got body-piercing bolts, which can be very effective, but its accuracy against infantry is lower than that of, say, the mangonel. And it's particularly useful for sniping out enemy artillery pieces. Pretty well for that reason. So it's more of an anti-artillery piece than anything else. It's got probably higher ammo, I think, than most other siege engines, except for the trebuchet, which I believe has like 10 or 12. But yeah, it's a ballista. It does what you expect it to do, and it has a detachment of iron-shod crossbows that man it. Although it's worth noting that they don't have their crossbows; they just fight in melee. So it's the same melee stats here that you're going to see on the unit card. Next up, we have the Orc Mangonel, and this one also has the same crew, but it is a little bit different, and I do find that this is a siege engine preferred by the Orcish testers on our build. It's a hybrid engine, and what that means is that it has its fiery projectile that we all know and love from the Mangonel, that is particularly useful against infantry, and then when that runs out, it has a projectile that is comparable to that of a trebuchet. It has less ammunition than a trebuchet by far, and of course the range is lower, but its secondary projectile is effective against buildings. So you have one shot for infantry, and then one shot for taking on battlements and fortifications afterwards. So it's good in a siege and in a field battle, and that's why I think a lot of people tend to like it. But that's going to do for the roster breakdown. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now let's jump into our 2v2 replay. I'll see you guys on the battlefield. Alright, before we get started, I would like to point out that this map was actually made by Stewart of Dale, so I'd like to give a big thank you to him, and I find myself doing this almost every video, but I also find myself playing on his maps a lot, and he does put a lot of effort into them, and I feel that needs to be recognized, so big thank you to him. Without Stewart of Dale, I think we'd be much poorer in terms of the amount of maps that we have to play on and the amount of variety that brings, so big thank you to him. Few important terrain features to note about this is that there's main lanes of attack here. So I am going to be bottled up a little bit, which obviously doesn't work in my favor terribly well. And as is my ally, he's going to have some pretty rough terrain here to go over. And he's going to start a little bit farther away from the enemy than I will. So because of the way the deployment zones have worked out here, my teammate is going to have to trek across all of this open ground to try and catch the forces of Doriath across from him, whereas they are able to easily reinforce their allies. So this is going to be an interesting battle. It's going to be kind of a race for time to see who can get the appropriate amount of reinforcements to save their ally from the other team. But yeah, so let's take a look at my army here. I've brought all of the beasties, literally all of the big scary monsters that I could. This is my first time playing with this comp. And I brought some Valaraukar, or Balrogs, and I've also brought 2 units here of the Troll Guard of Gothmog, as I said I would. Also got some Uruloki, big scary monsters. I've got 2 units of Guardians of Karn Doom, I believe 2 units of Reavers, 2 units of Halberdiers, 2 units of Wretches of Angband with a Chevron as well. I've brought 1 full unit of Arbalists, and I've also got a detachment of Arbalists right here as well. I think that pretty well does for my infantry. No, I've got some Bulldogs as well. I know Castellan is out here watching this. I still haven't replaced the textures on these guys, but they will look a little bit different when you guys get your hands on the open alpha. That's going to do it for my army. Let's pop across the field and say hello to our teammate. And I believe this is Tolin Gauderhoth, played by D.T. Ritchie, one of my guildmates. He has brought the Fearsome Mangonel. He's also got Throngshik Wolfborn, which is their knight unit, and a general's bodyguard as well. He's also got Laugskaraz Zagulkalab. I know it's scary, it looks like a mouthful, but it's actually not that bad. Laugskaraz right there. And another, nope. 2 companies of Laugskaraz, 1 company of the Gijakskaraz. These wargs here are armor-piercing, important to note, whereas these wargs are not, but they are much heavier and much able to kind of almost fight like a mobile infantry force. He's also brought Hishburg-Kraus Howlers, Loch Morale Light Infantry, decent shock troops. Got some Scouter High Blood Drinkers here as well. Speaking of shock troops, these guys are armor-piercing, but not Loch Morale. More Howlers. Got some Long Fangs here, medium infantry. They got a little bit of a buff in this patch. They've got now 6 armor instead of the 5 they previously had. More Blood Drinkers, Long Fangs, some Trappers here, who have had their throwing animations changed. Now they throw all in one big cloud, which has a lot of burst damage instead of trickling in over time. Also got some Gijakskaraz Chosen. These are the Wolf Guard Chosen. And yeah, they're a spear unit, heavily armored, really good shield. And they've also got an Inspire effect to help keep some of the other lesser clans in line. I think he has Ash Priests maybe somewhere around here. He's got some more Gijakskaraz and some Laugskaraz on the other side. So quite a lot of cavalry. It's about 6 units of cavalry in total, which is going to be tough to use in this kind of mountainous terrain where things are not quite so open, so you can't easily get value off them. But we'll see how that ends up working out for him. But yeah, that's going to do it for our team. Let's go ahead and see what the opposite team is bringing to the battle today. Our opponents, if you will. The enemy directly opposite myself is going to be the House of Finarfin, played by Steward of Dale. And he has brought some archers of Talathdirnan, so the regular line archers, like a medium mid-tier unit. He's also got some scouts of Tauren Faura, who are 2-handed spears, particularly useful at screening back lines and acting as a very strong support unit. Also worth noting that they have poison arrows as well, so they can deal morale damage from afar. Got some swordsmen of Talathdirnan here. This is the full unit, so they're not armor-piercing javelins. Bridge wards of Nargothrond as well, a fearsome pike unit that I'm going to struggle to deal with. Also got some wardens of Nargothrond here, armor-piercing, heavily armored spearmen. Defenders of Talathdirnan, excellent line-holding unit. Arqueni Mormagilua, and I know somebody out there wanted to see these guys in battle today, and you're going to get that opportunity. They are the personal bodyguard of Turin himself. Their name in Quenya means Knights of the Black Sword. Sorry if you can hear that siren going off in the background there. Not much I can do about that, though. On the other side, we've got some Marksmen of Nargothrond. These are split-shot archers, which are excellent units for scything through lightly armored and even middling armored infantry, while the host of Nargothrond pins them in place with their spears and their pikes. Also got Swordsmen of Talathdirnan in the back here, forming up a reserve, and the second company of Bridge Wards of Nargothrond as well. And there's a bunch of swordsmen here, so this is where a lot of the offensive power from this Nargothrond army is. Another unit of Wardens of Nargothrond, and then some more reserve companies here. So we've got Defenders of Talathdirnan, and then another unit of Wardens of Nargothrond. Actually, I think this one over here is a detachment. So we've got 2 full companies of them, and then one of the detachments, or possibly even the second one as well. I think that's going to do for his army, so let's go ahead and see what his ally has brought to the battle today, and that's going to be the army of Doriath, played by Inarius. He's got Mounted Company of Region here. In addition, Sword Host, lots of Sword Host, 3 units of them there. 2 units of Warriors of Region who are anti-armor and anti-monster. Got some Doneth and Moblung as well. And Shield Bearers of Region. And finally, a couple units here of Wardens of the Girdle, nicely locking down this area with their pikes. And then up here, we have some Kuthalim, armor-piercing archers. Recently got an accuracy buff in this, and these guys are the absolute bane of the Thrangshik warlords. If they're able to shoot freely for even a minute or so, they could very severely damage that unit, reducing its combat effectiveness to just about nothing. I think that he's got some more units hiding out here. Probably somewhere, maybe. But we'll see as the battle goes on. So let's go ahead and get this started. Hope you guys enjoy it. Knowing full well that the longer I hang back and allow the archers of Nargothrond to fire freely into me, the worse off I'm going to be. My army is tooled for getting in close and smashing things apart. That's why I brought all these monsters. That's why I've got my Uruloki. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to size up my my enemy here and go for the side of his army that I think I'm most likely to defeat with my best troops. So I've got my Halberds and my Guardians of the Iron Crown here, and they're going to be leading the way with my Valor Raukar I'm going to try and break him as quickly as I possibly can. Archers of Nargothrond run spraying me down with those split shot arrows. I wanted to get behind this halo as quickly as possible as well to try and block that line of sight. And once that happens, he's going to switch focus to my other end. Got some more units here moving forward. Bridge wards, defenders of Talath Dyrnin, and this is where I have less substantial forces. I've got my Reaver companies. I think 3. Yep, I got 3 of them in total. And this is where my Troll Guard are going to get committed. And I'm going to try and use my my crossbows to try and even out the fight as well. I'm going to position them centrally so I can support either wing as needed. But this is certainly going to be where I'm going to struggle the most, as this is where the highest concentration of his elite troops happens to be. Swordsmen of Talath Dyrnin trying to get off a quick cheeky volley here, which they will be successful in doing. My Orc Reavers are not going to have fun with that. Certainly not going to thank the elves for tossing that point-blank volley in. Oh, it's nasty. Now all the units falling over are going to die, but it is going to break up their charge and deny me the charge on my axe units, which is kind of what I needed here to get some value off of them. Got some Stalkers of Tauren Fauroth running in as well, and this is going to be a tough fight. My Troll Guard moving in on both wings. Maybe what I should have done is try and concentrate them, concentrate my power in one area and try and break that. But things aren't going great for me there. Got Ironshod Reavers moving up this side. I'm going to try and outflank the host of Finarfin. And as soon as I see what's going on over there, I'm going to send my Ururoki over as well and try and get some cheeky fire volleys off with them. What do we got here? Looks like we managed to catch a detachment of Wardens of Nargothrond. We're going to push them hard with our halberds and everything that they don't like to have arrayed against them. Arquini Mormagilwa leading the charge as the House of Finarfin here counterattacks my line. Defenders of Talath Dyrnin backing them up with numbers. This is where my Guardians are going to really struggle. Defenders pushing their way in. Swordsmen of Talath Dyrnin supporting with a few javelin volleys. We're doing our best here. I got my Bulldogs on the back lines, but they're taking heavy fire. They don't have their armor upgrade, as I couldn't afford it, so I'm going to toss them into the fight as quickly as I'm able. Valor Raukar are nearby as well. Ooh, this is where it gets fun. I think I might have to make this my screenshot. Oh yeah, that's beautiful. Although I fry some of my own trolls. I wasn't really expecting it to kill the trolls, but since they have such high armor, but unfortunately it does kind of fricassee some of my troll guard. That's okay. Stalkers of Tauren Fauroth running forward. My Uruloki are going to be more than capable of defending themselves against this, even with the two-handed spears and the bonus that they have against elephants. My Uruloki have a very high amount of armor. They're going to have lots of fun there. Did get some decent damage done before they were silenced. I've got my Ironshot Arbalists in the back here trying to focus down these big concentrations of the House of Finarfin. But while that battle hangs in the balance, let's pop on over to the other side here. And Doriath is going to opt to retreat here in the face of the advance by Tolkien Gauderhoth. Looks like Richie was looking to pick a fight, but the Doriath player Inarius is going to opt instead to move to support his ally and try and double team me. If they can do that, this is actually a really sound strategy that I see used all the time. If they are able to gang up on me, then they will crush me quickly and efficiently, and by the time the Tolkien Gauderhoth manages to get over here, then all might be lost for our teams. This is going to be a tough fight. But that being said, we are actually ahead by 2%. Let's go ahead, turn things actually up to full speed as they cross the line here. You can see battle rages hard. House of Finarfin being pressed hard by my Valor Raukar, who have committed to the fray alongside my Bulldogs. They're in there as well. And this is where the tide begins to turn a little bit, especially over here on the wing. Swordsmen of Talath Dyrnin, who were previously in support, have now been committed. The Wardens of Nargothrond, still very, very heavy in their numbers here, but kind of in the center I'm beginning to thin out my enemy, and Steward of Dale's battle line is growing a little bit more precarious by the moment there. Archers and Scouts laying down suppressing fire on my Ironshot Arbalists, who thankfully have decent enough armor that they are going to be able to weather that storm for some time. And I'm going to continuously use them to focus down these big blobs here of the House of Finarfin's army. This is where their core strength is. You can see them beating me back. Defenders of Talath Dyrnin have managed to break through. They're going to go after my Arbalists, so I'm going to move in with my reserve companies of Riches of Angband to try and lock them down. My Uruloki being supported by wretches up there as well, and they've managed to disentangle themselves, and they're going to be able to resume their bombardment on the House of Finarfin's right wing. Another cheeky fire volley. Yes, yes. I love it. This was such fertile ground for using my Uruloki in a decisive way. And I can see how heavily I'm losing on this side. I've had to commit wretches to fight against heavy elven infantry. And now Doriath has arrived on scene. Warriors of Region, 2 companies of them, along with the Doneth and Mablung. And they're going to move to reinforce the failing left, or rather right wing of the House of Finarfin army, as they're being beaten down by my elite troops. That being said, the battle's still in the balance. On their wing here, they are in quite high numbers with a lot of quality. Pikes in the center doing their best to hold back the storm, and now that's this failing section of their line is going to get some reinforcements in the form of Doriath. Scouts have been committed as well, and my wretches of Angband, thank goodness for their chevron, because they would have been out of here at the first sign of trouble otherwise. Looks like they're moving to try and outflank my other company of wretches, who along with my Uruloki are now starting to turn the tide of battle here against the Elves of Finarfin. That being said, elsewhere on the line, my Reavers have melted away. My Troll Guard are long since dead, and it's just a tiny little company of Angband wretches here who are holding back this tide of Elven infantry. And they're not going to stand and fight for too long, not as this battle begins to turn against them. Looks like we got pikes in there as well, and this is going to be my cue to fall back with my arbalists and try and form a little bit of a killing zone here that I can use to harass the Elves of Nargothrond once they predictably wipe out my troops over on that side. And I can use these arbalist troops here to try and thin things out on the other end. Says that they're losing, but honestly, look at their numbers compared to what I have arrayed against them. Jonathan Mablung have now arrived on scene. Archers of Talathirn about to be committed to the fray, and that's why I start to pull out my Valaraukar here. I need them over here, where they can be most useful, but if I let them get entangled with the Jonathan Mablung, they will get absolutely shredded. So a little bit of tactical redeployment needed there. And Tolin Gaurhoth still rushing to get themselves into a position where they can support me. Their whole army running across the plains here in a desperate bid to get to my side before the Elves of Doriath crush me in a 2v1. And it's looking pretty grim here. My wretches of Angband, very heavily reduced. Elves of Nargothrond have definitely broken through here. And this is going to be where I try to cut them down with my arbalists. Looks like they're having some trouble firing, unfortunately, which sucks for me. They're going to reform, but that's not going to give them a lot of time to fire into these units as they advance. Ironshot arbalists over on this side, about to get hit from the rear by the bridge wards of Nargothrond. And the battle still hangs in the balance. My Valaraukar are quite bloodied from battle, but they are helping to turn the tide here against the elves. In the center, Archers of Talathirn fighting against my super depleted halberd line, but with the help of the Bulldogs and a decently strong company of Guardians, we are managing to hold on. Jonathan Mablung have actually taken a lot of damage, mostly due to my arbalists in the back who I was using to focus them down. But alongside the Arqueni Morn Magilua, this is where they are going to start to pull it back. I mean, look at what they have to fight against. Depleted halberds, some of which are facing the wrong way. They got that in the bag for sure. The arbalists fleeing in the face of the Elves of Nargothrond, who are victorious on the other side. These guys getting caught out by some stalkers of Tauad and Fauroth. My Uruloki, however, are still doing well. Still full strength. And that's a big bonus for me. Wretches of Angband here holding the line against the defenders of Talathirn as Doriath and Nargothrond close the vice around what remains of my infantry. My wretches up here getting tired, fighting against some really scary Doriath infantry who are having no trouble dispatching them whatsoever. They are also on the verge of routing. Furious fight in my backlines here. I managed to catch the bridge wards of Nargothrond, who are actually quite vulnerable to the armor-piercing area damage of my Uruloki, and you can see them taking big bites out of the strength of this unit, one of the most important units that the Elves of Finarfin still have left on the field, getting munched up by their direct counter. What do we got over here? Jonathan Mablung, yeah, being pulled out of the fight. Looks like maybe they've started to lose over here, and they're kind of writing this off as a loss. Arquini Mormagilma make their last stand. And now would be a good time to go into battle against my Balrogs, and I can see them. I can see them going after me, so I'm going to deny them that easy victory and start to pull out my Valaraukar. Oh, this one might not be so lucky. Yeah, now I'm starting to focus them down with crossbows from afar. Trying to get my Balrog out of there. Is he going to make it? I'm not too sure. And this is where the decisive moment happens. Thank goodness for my ally, Richie, arriving on scene with his wargs. The Laxgaraz Agulkalab cutting down those archers. Now we're going to start to turn the tide against the House of Finarfin. Elsewhere, his army has engaged with the with some remnants of Nargothrond the Steward of Dale was able to save, and he's going to make his stand here alongside his ally Doriath. Mounted Company hacking their way to the Gijaxgaraz Agulkalab. There goes the Nargothrond General. We're going to go in and take a look at some of the havoc that's going to wreak. And that should be enough to cause the rest of these guys to break here. Even though Arquini Mormagilua are thinking twice. With Donath and Mamblong are being sorely missed on the other side. They are managing to hold a pocket of resistance together, but for the most part, the House of Finarfin has been defeated in our engagement. Elsewhere, the Hishburkunaz and the clans of Gulkala descend upon the guarded realm of Doriath, and they're holding very well. The Sword Host here shouldn't have too much trouble cutting their way through the Blood Drinkers of the Longfangs. They're certainly giving them what for. Now with the arrival of some Axguard, who are excellent at cutting down chaff units, this is where the battle is going to start to turn. You can see heavy commitment of Doriath elite infantry on their left wing, and that is driving back the orcs of Tolhin Gaurhoth. Elsewhere over here, support against the cavalry is going to give the Mounted Company of Region the boost that they need to turn back the assault of the wargs on their left wing. A little bit of support back there from the Wardens of the Girdle, and things are not looking great. I can't allow this fight to continue to go on like this, so I need to finish up with the House of Nargothrond as quickly as I am able, but Steward of Dale is putting up a very valiant rearguard action, so this is going to be a race against time again, as I try desperately to destroy these units here. I've got both of my scary units attacking them at the same time, and that's going to be enough to send these units into a tailspin from which they will not recover. Some Warriors of Region here. I think they got fricasseed by my Uruloki, who popped off a cheeky volley. There's still a fair amount of Doriath infantry here, though, and they're about to rout my halberdiers. And then the last stand by the Donath and Mablung, alongside the Wardens of Nargothrond, as our wargs and what remains of my elite infantry descend on them. These units are going to break, and the Donath and Mablung, I expect, will be soon to follow. Only about 16 or so of them left. And now I finally disentangled myself from what remains of Steward's army. Now I have to cut through the Doriath units. There goes the general for the orcs of Tolhin Gaurhoth, and that's gonna really put a big timer on my ability to move in and help him out. So I need to get in there as fast as I can. Luckily we have some breaking here. Orcs of Talath Dirnan. The Mangonel has finally been brought to bear, and that's going to be important with all these units engaged. Scarhigh Blood Drinkers getting focus fired down by Wardens of the Girdle. Kuthalim, I think, were responsible for the death of their Tolhin Gaurhoth general. House of Finarfin, leaderless, fleeing from the field. But all the Doriath infantry units over here engaged in a fierce struggle with Tolhin Gaurhoth. It's hard to tell who's going to be able to come out on top here. Certainly the quality is in favor of the Elves of Doriath. There's just so much infantry pouring into this section. And that cavalry is going to push right on through. They're going to get into the Howlers. They're going to have no problem cutting them down. Kuthalim focusing down the Thrangshik Wolfborn, as they should. Wardens of the Girdle. Not sure what they're doing here. Swordsmen of Talath Dirnan actually came back from routing. Lausgaraz Agulkalab. We're about to get countercharged there. Richie using his cavalry well. Now they're going to go after the other company of Wardens of the Girdle, who still have ammunition, and they're putting devastating fire into the Scarahai blob over here, and actually causing quite a lot of routing. Richie's not going to let that go on for too long, however, and that charge is going to hurt. Warriors of the Girdle now silenced. And it seems like the heavy infantry, at least, of the Orcs of Tolingaudath is having some success. Ooh, a nice charge here in the center. Going to relieve a lot of pressure on the Gijak Scout as chosen. But Doriath is still fairly healthy. Scar High Trappers throwing what remains of their javelins into the Doriath heavy infantry. Trying to even out this fight, but it's just chaos and madness everywhere. There's fire on the ground. There's dead wargs everywhere. Elves, orcs fleeing in turn. Complete chaos. And the Gijak Scout there in the face of the elite warriors of the Kuthalim are going to break off. It looks like Doriath has been beaten back on their left wing. Steward of Dale's men, what remains, have rallied, and they're moving to intercept here and fight alongside another beleaguered company of swordsmen. And this is where my army starts to make its presence felt on the battlefield. It took me a moment to marshal everybody and to get them in. And some of the survivors here of Tolingaudath have actually rallied around my troops. I'm going to try and get everyone I can in here. I don't want to throw my Valoraucar all by themselves, as they are quite bloodied. Ooh, almost getting hit by some artillery there. Mounted company going after the Mangonel, going to finish them off. Victorious units from Doriath's center converging on Tolingaudath's left wing, looking to rout them. And so far, so good. Scar High Longfangs running away. Gijak Scout's units here, taking a bite out of the Kuthalim. I think Doriath probably feels that they have this in the bag. Now they're bringing back their cavalry here. They've silenced the Mangonel. And they're at least off the engine for a moment. They can move in for something decisive. But it's Howlers. It's predominantly Howlers here. And while that's going to hurt the Howlers, it's certainly not going to appreciate that. There is no way to rout these units. So Gijak Scout has chosen are the ones they want to try and make flee. But the Howlers are doing what they do best. And now the Doriath troops are going to find themselves trapped between the hammer and the anvil as my battered but victorious army descends on them from the rear. Some charges there from the cavalry are going to turn this into a bit of a massacre. Uruloki pounding their way through the lines, tossing friend and foe alike into the air. Hell of a game. And this is where the tide turns for the worst against Doriath. I send my Valoraucar up here. Scar High Trappers raining down death. Cavalry charging in, trying to get something done, but the wargs of Tolingaudath are not far behind. What do we have here? Cavalry being pulled out and sent against the Scar High Trappers. Might be enough to rout them in a single charge. Oh, I might. Not quite. The Gijak Skaraz, or the Laugskaraz rather, arrive on scene. And now the mounted company of Region are surrounded on all sides by a sea of foes. Scar High Trappers do end up breaking after all, though. But what a messy battle. This is very Battle of the Bastards-esque. Doriath units have been cut down. The last pocket of resistance here has been run down by my Uruloki. I think it's really just the mounted company who are the only ones standing firm for the guarded realm. And they're not going to be too much longer for this world either. Wavering, depleted, most of their friends slain around them. Still a fairly close battle. 16% difference, but honestly, if you look at what we have and like what I have, it's mostly like trash tier infantry. There's a few like quality units in here. My Uruloki really account for a lot of the strength of my army. Valoraucar getting in there. These mounted companies, stubborn in the face of defeat. And that's going to be it, I think. That'll be enough to send them packing for good. I think there's some Donathan Mablung that managed to survive that massacre on the other side. They're going after who? Some Gijak Skaraz units. And this should be it. The final armed might of Doriath being surrounded, overwhelmed, and destroyed. And that's going to be the end of our battle today. We'll go ahead, fast forward a little bit here. I think maybe there's some like tiny remnants. What do we have here? Oh, King Thingol himself squaring off against a couple of Balrogs. I didn't even realize that this happened in the game. Damn. King Thingol cut down by the mighty Balrogs. So we're gonna add a King of the Sindar to their rising body count of Noldor royalty, or Elven royalty, I should say. And yeah, it was a good game, a really good game. It's honestly, I see a lot of people look at this and they're like, "Whoa, 800 men remaining. That wasn't even close at all." This includes this right here. So casualties healed. Look at all of that. It's a few hundred still. That's a few hundred like extra casualties to tack on to there. Richie was obviously in a better position than I was. He had a lot of like howlers and stuff left, so mostly chaff infantry. But yeah, damn fine 2v2. Inarius did really well for his team, nearly 2,000 kills. Richie got a little bit less, but then he took a bit longer to get into the fight because Doriath was retreating in the face of him to try and support his ally Steward of Dale. Steward held out well. He got a little bit less kills, but I also had less orc infantry to go around, so that's kind of to be expected as well. Well, so far I hope you guys have enjoyed this this preview for Silmarillion Total War, and I hope you're excited about the Angband faction. You'll be able to get your hands on them soon on the 24th of December. If you haven't already seen my announcement video, yes, we will be releasing an alpha, and you guys are all going to be able to play on our new maps, and yeah, just enjoy the new factions. So one important thing to note is that since the announcement video is already out, if you haven't watched it, there is important information in there, especially in regards to like graphical settings and other little things you can do to ensure that you don't have crashes. So that's important. Please go and watch it. It's paramount, I would say. It's absolutely essential to enjoying Silmarillion Total War the way that it is meant to be enjoyed. So yeah, my name is Jordan, also known as JMonster. Hope you guys like this, and I'll see you later.